Good morning.
Good morning, Erica.
Lee, thank you for being here. Tell me the journey. Let's tell everybody about the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because the question of how I got into katana is the same as how I got into Seric, and now I have 3 Serics and all these mills and everything, and it all started with katana. So I was working at an office over by where I grew up, which is ironically the one place I said I didn't want to work is the zip code that I grew up. But I got a job at an office. They were pretty digital, and they had scanners and stuff, but they didn't have any in-office manufacturing. And the owner doctor had always wanted to get into it, and so he knew he hired a little nerd, and so he scheduled a demo to have them come and we were going to try out a Seric crown. And so they literally one rep brought his car with a Seric in the back. The other one brought his car with a mill, and the vacuum and everything. And so we literally scheduled a crown during lunch.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And so we prepped the same way that we always prep. And then, the reps went to lunch and they're like, okay, here's this block. I want you to stick this in the mill and hit the start button. And then when you're done, it's going to be a crown. I was like, okay. And the block said katana on it. And I was like, oh, okay, this looks kind of fancy. And so we polished it up and cemented it or I guess tried it in, and it just fit perfectly. It was just so easy. And that was not what my experience was with CAD/CAM ever in the past with these glass ceramic restorations. And you put it down on the tooth and it wiggles, and it's relying on all that cement to
hold it
down.
Yeah, you're just hoping, making sure that it's going to stick and stay and keep in there. Yeah.
It's not like that. It wasn't like that. And that was a huge paradigm shift for me in what CAD/CAM dentistry really, really means. And it's so funny nowadays because all people do if you're scanning and sending to the lab is they're going to do the same thing that we're doing. But now we get to do that same manufacturing process in the office. So
it's kind of neat, how you have control of the full process, and really even your patients getting that education, knowing and seeing everything that's happening. And it's not like they leave and, wonder what's happening when they come back. Something is going to magically appear. But,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or, I'm coming to a conference or whatever, and you get the phone call that the temporary crown came off, right? It's so nice to not have those things happen. And I mean, since I started my practice, every year we do almost 1,000 crowns. And of those crowns, 99.9% of them are katana. And I think last year we had one of them come off and have to be re-cemented. That's unreal. We've had 0 of them fracture.
It must not have been our cement.
I think it probably got wet is what actually happened. And it was a short little tooth in the anyway. But it's crazy to think of those numbers though, because you almost don't think that it's possible to have something that's almost 100% effective in your hands. Absolutely. But it really is. It is that easy. And having now trained all of my associates to do the same thing, as the owner doctor, I want to make sure that the quality of care for the patients is as high as possible. And by having Seric and katana in our office, that's what we do. And if something just didn't go right, which basically never happens, but if it does, you can quickly identify, pivot, and then still correct the same day. And
that's
we're showing
amazing.
The patients the x-rays and the photos and all of that stuff of what's actually going on with their teeth.
Yeah, you can almost troubleshoot right then and there, right? So, and I love that you're a self-proclaimed dental nerd, and I'm a dental materials nerd myself. So
that must be why we're friends.
That's why we click so well. Yeah, and as far as what you're doing with the technology and the excitement that you have with that, tell me about that, because you really do, just like your story of how you got into Seric and how you got into zirconia, specifically katana, even the iteration of STML, katana STML, the original, and then
the original,
right? And then, we just have worked on it. Our guys from Japan, KND is an amazing team, and they've made it into Katana One, and now we have Katana Speed.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. The Katana Speed. It is crazy when you ask how long we've known each other. It's like, okay, we started with we had an MCXL and we bought, and the reps were like, you have to buy the 14Z size block. And so we had I don't know, 200 14Z size blocks. And then the prime mill comes out and we're all excited because we can super fast mill, and it cut the mill time down. We lost about 10 minutes. It became a 4 to 6 minute mill, which was just awesome.
Yeah.
But all the blocks we had weren't compatible with super fast mill. And so we're literally like shipping them back and trying to get the 12Z blocks. And then the firmware update came on the prime mill and all of the burrs broke and the blocks broke. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like this has been such a labor of love to get there.
Yeah.
And so just finally see KATANA Speed, and I've been thankful that you've let me test it and see something that was a first when we got into CAD/CAM, Zirconia specifically. That was a 3-hour appointment.
Wow.
We needed time to get the patient done, to get the scans, to rescan, because we obviously had tissue in the way or something happened, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's 18 something minutes in the mill.
Right.
You can't preload the block in the MCXL, and then you're polishing it, which is 2 to 5 minutes, and then you're sintering it, which is 18 and a half minutes, and then you're delivering it, right? And so that whole process, it ended up taking a long time.
Right.
And so now with KATANA One and Prime Mill, we're at like an hour and a half, 2 hours for a crown, but KATANA Speed, we're at an hour. We can do an hour crown visit, which is just absolutely unreal.
Right.
How the Prime Mill saved 10 minutes off the manufacturing from the milling side, and then now we get to save 10 minutes off the sintering side. And that's not something I ever even would have imagined, because we were just so blown away with how good it was at 3 hours. But, an hour crown visit is the holy grail, because that's what all the people that don't do CAD/CAM brag about. Right. They're like, my crown visits are an hour and I make my temporary and whatever else. It's like, well, what if your final restoration was available in an hour? Right. I mean, that's just, it's absolutely crazy. And I mean, that's exactly how it's been for us. It's literally a plug and play workflow. It's the same material that we know and love, we prep with the same burrs. We, deliver with the same cements. Like, everything just works just as well as it did. It's just faster, which is, it's unreal. It really is. I think that's one of the biggest things that has made a difference in our practice. And we've gotten to taste it a little bit over the last period of time when we've been testing it, but like that changes the whole dental practice, right? That's you have a Friday and you can do 3 crowns in a 5-hour Friday. Like, you could never have done that before.
So actually, that's what I was going to ask. As far as, so obviously production has changed for you because this product is now cutting down your time and allowing you to do more. But how about, tell me about how that's affected even your patients and the way that your care is delivered with them,
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether they notice or not.
They absolutely have. So it's funny, like most general dentists that have all the technology, we claim to be a high-end general practice, and we want our patients to have the best experience possible. And we try really hard to deliver on that. Yeah. But something about 30 minutes of manufacturing time with the potential to, rescan or something, your patient just gets kind of bored, and they'll wander over to the bathroom, or they'll go and want to grab something from their car. And then we're literally, our office is a circle, like so many practices. We're chasing the patient around, the staff's chasing the doctor around. Yeah. And it shouldn't be a 2-hour visit. It just, it always happens that way. Right. Yeah. And so for patients now, 10 minutes is long enough to check your phone. I mean, I lose 10 minutes if I check my email. And so for so many people, that's what it's like now. And they kind of look down and then they look up and they're like, oh, it's ready. We're ready to try the crown in. And they're like, oh, it's done. Yeah. Right. So that it really does drastically change their perception of it. It's not that, oh, I'm paying the convenience of not having to come back for the temporary by being bored for 30 minutes. They just get a slight break and then boom, we're done. And it really, that is a huge difference from how we run our practice, but how the patients perceive the technology too. Right.
And I'm guilty of that as going to my dentist too, and I'm really picky with who I go to, obviously for obvious reasons, but it's just nobody really does want to just stay there. I kind of make it, okay, so I'm sitting here, I'm going to look around and see what you've got, but that's not the typical patient.
I can see that. You're going through the drawers.
What is this? And what is that? But that's not, that's not an everyday patient. Yeah. Everyday patient wants to be in and out. And no matter how great your relationship with them, it's never that they choose to be in that dental seat. So I think that's, that's a great thing to be able to deliver for them. That
Absolutely.
kind of service. Yeah.
And I mean, for us, from a staffing perspective too, right?
Yeah.
Like, for the 30-minute manufacturing time, you almost need to send a dental assistant into the room to babysit them, right? Like, but we don't have to really do that. That same
Right.
assistant can disappear for, again,
That's
10
true.
minutes and then come back when
Right.
that process is done and they're ready to then take the
Yeah.
try and x-ray and then actually deliver the crown.
So with you, just kind of give me your feedback, because we're always listening. This is the reason why the iteration has gone, right? So, I mean, again, going from STML when it was 30 minutes, if you can even remember when
Yeah.
that was. And then, people always say we're listening, we're taking in what you're saying, but Kuraray really does. And I think that's what I'd like to talk to you about.
Yeah.
With our experience just working with one another, like it does. I share that information, and all of a sudden, one thing that's so common in the CEREC community, I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm just letting you know what the feedback is you asked, but they're like, oh no, we're going to work on this. And STML turned into, instead of a one millimeter reduction or minimum thickness, now you're at 0.8. And then, the blocks were cracking for some people, and I don't even know if that was a material, but now they've optimized the powder, and then Katana One was born from that. And then strength now is, a thing that everybody's always concerned about. I mean, 1,023 megapascals for speed. So they are listening, but, how do you feel about that? That kind of relationship, and you see when you've gone to our events, you have full access to our R&D team.
Yeah.
So.
And they're like the nicest human beings too. Like, you're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for the products. And they're like, oh, you're welcome. They're like blown away that someone's so thankful. But I mean, it's really crazy. And that's one of the benefits, I think, of working with a smaller company that, I mean, of course I want Kuraray to get huge, but a smaller company that really does listen is that you obviously have listened and made those progresses and done the things that we need, not just doing things and making changes just to make changes and then forcing a new product on anyone.
And that's the thing. It's not like we have 10,000 different blocks available.
Yeah.
It's almost like, wait, don't get rid of that yet. But they're like, but it's not as good. So we're going to move on to this one.
Yeah.
And that's going to sunset. But yeah, I ask you that because I feel like the folks in Japan, they work really hard. And I always want to address them and let them know like that's something that they've been able to do for you and for your patients. So yeah, thank you for that. And your feedback is always.
Of course. I mean, it's funny. I remember one of our many pre-meeting phone calls when we were talking about the like crowns coming out and they looked a little like white or frothy or something like that. And it turns out that when you do 5,000 crowns in your Speedfire, then you might need to replace the little birthday cake thing that it goes on there. And now I know that we call it the birthday cake, but everyone has learned from that. And I can't tell how many dentists I've told about that wear item that it turns out too. And you guys listened and were very on top of that problem solving too. So, and when you told me that you guys have a warehouse full of all the reference and lot numbers and that if something broke, you're literally going to mill the same crown and test it out yourselves. I mean, that's dedication, that's
I was
crazy.
Blown away. So I went to the Miyoshi factory, which is where they process, they make the actual katana blocks. And literally, they have the process, but at the end, there's a person checking each block. And I'm like, that's not efficient, but that's literally the type of quality that they have.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that every single block is actually checked for quality. And they put each lot on a shelf somewhere. And then if somebody says there's something wrong, they go back to the closet, this freezing closet, and they check to see they pull it off the shelf. And it's like, it's amazing. So
that's really cool. I mean, it's funny because that level of quality is something I wasn't aware of, the, hand measuring human at the end of the supply chain, but like we feel that quality as clinicians, and that quality has been one of the things that caused us to use more Kuraray products, both from organic discovery, just from having tried different bond products and found the ones that we like. And, it is Universal Bond Quick is what we have chosen. And now we're happy with Universal Bond Quick 2, which is even thinner and better. But like, when people order things from the lab, right, and inevitably you have to, and even as many single unit crowns as we do, and even multi-unit crowns, and we love to manufacture things ourselves, we do order things.
Right.
Clinicians write zirconia crown shade A2 on their lab slip, right? But like, that doesn't really mean anything to the lab. They're going to grab the cheapest zirconia puck they can, they're going to glaze it, and they're going to mail it back to you. There's so much more to zirconia than that, and so much more to dental materials than that. And so, I'm now the guy that writes exactly what I want on there. I mean, we do a lot of fixed full arch restorations, and all of those are made of katana. If they're a titanium bar with individual crowns, those are katana YML crowns.
Wow.
And if it's the whole arch, it's also a katana YML arch. And you can see that they look better. They really do, and they feel better. And we don't have breakage or debonding from the tie bases or any of those things that people complain about. It's just
That's great. Yeah.
you just I feel like as a clinician, you just have to be deliberate and careful about the things that you order and the things that you ask for, and just have to educate yourself and make sure that you're making the right decision.
And actually, to that point, they test these things with one another and the quality. And so not just Katana, but Panavia SA and Katana Cleaner, and you use UBQ2 now. And, and
it took me a while to realize when all of you guys are saying UB2 or UBQ2.
UBQ2.
That's a mouthful. I was like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm like, oh, Bond. Yeah.
Right. We sit there and like, what, it goes around, what kind of names, it actually comes around to our level, and we're asked that. And I'm like, it sounds catchy, but yet it's a mouthful. Right? Katana Zirconia ONE Speed, Katana Zirconia. But anyway, so
I always think of Jeremy Clarkson. I'm a big car guy, and I think he's always like, speed. And that's what literally, that's what I say in my head when I see this speed block.
Speed. Yeah, milling away.
Just so fast, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those type of products, they have the quality in mind when they're producing it, and then they're testing it with all of that family. So, talk to me about that, because you weren't always, using all the products.
Yeah. So it's funny. So my first introduction to any Kuraray product was when I got out of school and I was working that other office that I was mentioning. Before we even tried CEREC, I got some anterior crowns from the lab, and they were beautiful, and they were some sort of pressed ceramic and, hand layered, and just the really expensive, beautiful ones, right? And so they came, and my boss at the time, he had no resin cements, zero. Like we had no options. And so I had to come up with, how am I going to bond these? Like, how am I going to deliver these? And so I tried a couple of cements, and the one that I ended up liking was Panavia V5. And I liked the try and paste. I liked how easy it was to use, and the steps made logical sense. And I always liked bonding. Like, it makes sense to me. The steps make sense, and what the chemistry is doing makes sense. But I've watched so many people suffer with missing a step or getting confused or whatever else, from when I was tutoring in dental school to even working with other associates in my old job. And then now my associates, nobody likes the bonding. It's just
it's not sexy.
It's not, right? Because there's I forgot that tube of silene, or I forgot my
close the cap, it's gonna evaporate.
Literally. And then do you refrigerate it or not refrigerate it? And there's just all these things with it. And so I like the process, and there is something, sexy is not the right word, but there's something there's something really nice about isolating it, and then etching it, and then using the next step. And when you do all of those things and you see the x-ray at the end and it's just perfect. That's just, it's so rewarding. It's so nice. And that's what Panavia V5 was for me.
Nice.
And then the Panavia SA came out, and that was huge, because I got more into implant restorations, and we were doing implant restorations that we needed to cement the tie base, right? And all of that workflow used to be more complicated with all the additional chemistry. And I will say, as sexy as it is when it's 8 and 9, it's not sexy when it's number 30 implant crown and you're bonding the tie base. You really want something that you put the cement on there, you stick it in, and it just works. And that's what Panavia SA is for us now. We use it for everything. So it's been a great stand-in, and now you don't have to teach bonding, right? It's literally just, self-etch, self-adhesive. You just send it in and, clean it off, and it tack cure, clean it off, don't fully cure because, oh God, you need to get the Steri-Strip and like put up the contacts. But yeah, I mean, and my assistant delivers all my tie bases. And so she's in the back and she puts them together and she knows how the chemistry works and she can do all of that stuff for us in the lab, which is, it's easy, right? And so something that is chemically very complicated now just isn't, right? It's just easy to use, which is how we get more people to use it.
And that's the thing, you know, I think if a product is good, all the thought process is behind the scenes. And then what you need to do is to focus on delivering that, right? And having that patient come in and have a restoration that's successful at the end. So you and your clinical team aren't the ones trying to figure things out. What's supposed to go together, you know? And so we want to make sure that you have that, I guess, that kind of easy workflow. And that's what it's all about. It's about that workflow. It's about ease. It's about even speed, right? But all those things put together. And nowadays with CEREC, that technology just allows you that workflow. And
it didn't start that way, right? Yeah. Like that's it's interesting about the Panavia too, right? Like it starts off with quality. And so once you get the quality down and it's a long workflow, then you like get to, you know, optimize and then start to figure out which steps can be automated or which steps can be done at the same time as other steps. And that's how you get to the final, you know, that peak of the technological revolution is when things become a better workflow faster and still have that same quality that you were known for. And that's been one of the interesting things about Kuraray is that like there's no new product that we have to recall or something because it stops working or it doesn't work the right way. It all starts with quality first. And that's huge for us because I as a fellow dental materials nerd, you know, I get a lot of joy out of testing the products and like choosing the things and doing all of those things. But now between my two practices and all of the staff, I joke that we have 15 children now because it's just, you know, that everyone always like wants to talk to mom and dad and, you know, deal with all of that stuff. Right. And you don't necessarily have the same time as you did when you were a young dental material nerd to like sit there and play with the composite for a long time before you switch. And so knowing when you see a brand on that label that someone else has put that same level of dental nerd into it before it actually got shipped to the office is a huge, you know, it's really reassuring and that really helps us make better choices. So, you know, it's funny when we now all of my associates demand, you know, there's certain flow that they like. It's the blue, it's the blue Clearfield Majesty.
Yes.
And when, you know, and I mistakenly ordered them the red tube one time, they're like, no, the blue tube. We need the blue tube. It has to be the blue tube. I'm like, okay, you know, but they get really picky too, right? Because it just works so well and how it handles and how they're just get used to it. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, so you and I were talking before about even not just this current technology, but what's to come, you know, and because you are tinkering with all these different types of, you know, new toys, but digital technology, talk to me about what your thoughts are.
That's the So one of the biggest buzzword in dentistry that I've heard and listening to people try to pronounce it is hilarious is photogrammetry, especially for people that do implant restorations. It's photogrammetry, and the reality is that people, again, it's all comes back to workflow and how easy it is to do things. And what they're trying to really do with photogrammetry is get away from analog verification jigs for implant cases. And so we do full arch implants almost every day, and we don't use photogrammetry because the technology has come so far and because we are just obsessed with workflow. So the lab that we work with is Synergy. They're also huge Katana people. And we use our CEREC scanners to actually pick up that implant position in the mouth, and we're able to stitch all of those things together digitally to deliver the restorations. And so having watched 3D printing come from something that maybe you print some models to now something that we'd 3D print out our temporary restorations in the office. And so the patients get same day smiles or same day teeth, right? Like that revolution has been absolutely insane, and it's completely digital, and anyone can do this if you follow the steps and you know the workflow and you're really focused on quality.
Yes.
But it's been funny because the resin that we use to 3D print is not a Kuraray product. It's considered a permanent crown resin, and having watched what these look like after 3 or 6 months in people's mouth, that's just not there yet, right? Like, it works excellent for what it's doing, which is a fixed full arch provisional.
It's amazing what you guys can do with the aesthetics about it is.
It's really, really, it's pretty and it's strong, but it's not. I would not feel confident leaving a patient in that as a definitive and final restoration. It's not there yet. And obviously there's people a lot smarter than I am that are working to try to get that technology better. But also, when I take out one of those provisionals and I see the Katana YML product that I'm putting in for the final, the art that goes into that and how that material looks and feels, we're on different wavelengths, really, which it's just interesting. One of my best friends is a mechanical engineer, and to him, 3D printing, like to dentists, 3D printing is like, oh, it's so awesome, whatever else. And they're like, 3D printing is rapid prototyping. That's all it is. That's what it's been to engineers for a long time. And so that's what I feel like it is still in my hands and in my practice, is that it's great for making models. It's great for printing temporaries, but this is a rapid prototype. This is something for the patient to wear for 3 months while the implants heal. It looks nice. It lets us figure out where the aesthetics and the function and where the incisal edge is supposed to be, and all of those things that we obsess over.
Another tool.
It is, right. And we stay away from the acrylic and the dentures, and so it's great for that. But what it is a stepstone to get to where we're trying to go, which is, the final Katana restoration.
Right. And with the speed block, and the time that now it's cut down, like you said, it's truly a 1 hour appointment.
Right.
So,
no, I mean, that's an excellent point, right? Like, the connection between speed, both from the word and how we use it in our office, but also in the product and the block, right? Like, there are plenty of people, I mentioned permanent crown resin, right? Like, there are companies that are trying to say, oh, you can deliver a 3D printed crown. Well, I mean, that might be true, but that's a resin crown, right? Like, and we do a lot of teeth that are cracked, and cracked teeth need a ceramic overlay or a crown. And, I'll get some controversial people that disagree with me on that, so stand by for the comments. But like, we see a lot of cracked teeth, and a lot of them are symptomatic, and 0.8 millimeters of reduction with Katana and covering that up with a zirconia crown, most of the time that is a excellent option for those patients. That restoration, if it was 3D printed and is really a resin crown, it's not going to do the same thing, right? Like, you have to take off a lot more material, and then you're bonding something in there, but the bonding isn't the same as bonding a ceramic overlay or a ceramic onlay onto that tooth. You're not really strengthening it. You're not really helping to hold that tooth together. It's cracked. It needs help, right? And so the whole fast 1 hour appointment, right? Like, oh, this is where we're going with 3D printing. We can print this crown in 5 minutes, whatever else. I mean, that's fine, but like, we have to go back to a material science standpoint, and we have to go back to a dental science standpoint, right? Like, that Katana crown is not going to crack, right? Like, zirconia is the answer for that cracked tooth number 30, and to not have to do that in 3 hours now, like I did when we first met, to being able to do that in an hour with Katana Speed is, I'm speechless because I never thought that something like that would be possible. And so I feel like that's the advancement in technology that we really needed. And I'm optimistic for all the things that 3D printing can do for us, but it doesn't exist in the same headspace as what we do with Crown and Bridge. And
even, the process. And I think when people talk about 3D printing, they're talking about one little part of it. But, talk to me about, there's curing, there's cleaning. So what is your appointment really actually going to look like as compared to now you've scanned, you've designed, you've milled, you've sintered, and however way, one chooses to finish.
Yep.
Like, really
strong proponent of polish only.
Polish only, it's great.
Yeah, so when we do the 3D printed restorations, right, it's a whole arch of teeth, and if there's extra resin covering that, which there inevitably is, the 3D printed ceramics are weak if you immerse them in isopropyl alcohol, and so you have to either spray off the resin.
Okay.
and not submerge it, which is very labor intensive, or you get one of those fancy curing units that does the little spritzes in it, and it washes it for you, but you have to open up the screw channels, or you have to like clean off the little area where the supports were on the cusps and on the, like inside the central grooves and stuff. And so there is quite a bit of process that goes into post-processing that restoration. Once all of that happens, then it has to get cured and the little supports are polished off, right? And it comes out and it can be very beautiful because it's a composite, right? Like, and they just obviously with what people do for bonding for front teeth, I mean, people are artists. It really is amazing, right? But like picture, and I guess to put it into context, and I apologize for kind of rambling, but for my first probably 50 3D printed like temporary arch restorations, I was the one that was going back there and opening up the holes and cleaning it out and like taking the sprues off and polishing it and going through all of those steps because it's a lot.
Super labor intensive.
It is. And I have not polished one of my own katana crowns in a while because that process is so easy that my assistants, and they love it, they take pride in doing it. And there's one sprue on the back of it. So you cut that off. We cut it off with a diamond disc. We polish it down.
Thank you for not tapping it.
I would never tap it.
Never, ever. That wasn't you.
That was not me. Yeah. It wasn't me when I knocked it on the table and the crown cracked. So we cut it off carefully with the diamond disc and then polish the sprue back with a carbide burr and then get the last little bits of burr marks off with a twist polisher, right? And it's a little bit of an abbreviated version of it, but that's all pre-center polished. And then we blow some air on it to get the extra powder off and stick it in the furnace, right? Like that, it doesn't get any easier than that.
And that's the thing, I think people always ask, do you have a protocol for how you finish? And it's really the hands of that person, right? And like you said, it's easy enough that you can leave it in, you could show it once or twice to one of your clinical team members, and then they find their own method.
Oh, the 100%. And it ends up being like a dance between the doctor and the assistant too, because how they finish the design, I'm a little tiny bit of yellow on my interproximal contacts guy, and my associate, Dr. Bishop, he is a green guy. Like if there's yellow, then he might have to adjust the
twist
contacts.
Polishers?
Yeah, no. Okay. And so, he has his assistants perfectly calibrated to how to polish his crowns, and I have my assistants perfectly calibrated in how they polish mine, and each of us do the same thing, and that's that we don't have to adjust. Team Bishop. But they, we get the same results, and that's that neither of us have to adjust our crowns when we're delivering them. But it's funny the way that we get there. It is like his assistant's process is slightly different than my assistant's process, which is slightly different than my design and his design, right? Like it's not plug and play exactly. You have to think about it a little bit, but then everybody makes it their own. Yeah. And I guess the real key being one of Team Bishop's assistants, she timed herself how long it took to perfectly polish the crown after it comes out of the mill. And I know the answer is 2 minutes and 38 seconds because that's how long it took her. It's all about the process and the workflow and how smooth and seamless that can be. And those little nuances or what makes it special for that clinician. Yeah. I think the key though really is just how easy it is. Like he can be in another room checking hygiene or be prepping another tooth, doing some fillings or even prepping another crown. And that process just happens automatically for him. Yeah. And that's not, and I know some of the 3D printers are getting to the point that they will process themselves and wash the restorations and post cure them and all of those things. But it's not the same. And if I know you feel the same way. If you're holding a 3D printed crown in your hand and you're holding a katana crown,
you feel the difference. The quality even, right?
And like the sharpness, like those margins are like sharp. Right. If you tried to cut something, you probably could, right?
I actually have like a collection in my family's. What is happening here? It's all over the washer, right? So, because it ends up in my pocket sometimes. And it's just like, which one is the katana? And it becomes, this one, because you feel it. Yeah. You feel the difference, right?
Yeah. So, well, we felt it too. We've tried a lot of different zirconia blocks and I have a lot of them on my shelf. And like, you can feel it in the green state and the powder state after it's done being milled. Like you can feel it with your finger. It almost feels like the powder isn't as packed. It's just, it feels soft.
Right.
And I think the thing that amazed me the most is when there was another zirconia block that we tried, and when it came out, it was very strong, and you could really reduce quite a bit. This was way back when we were still on STML with Kuraray, and we were so excited because the megapascals were high, and it was less, much less reduction required.
Right.
And then you go and we polished it at the end of the appointment, the bite was high. And so I went and I polished it, and I took my diamond burr and on high speed with tons of water. And I went and I polished it, and it was like that whole cusp was gone.
Oh.
And I was like, I thought this was stronger.
Right.
And maybe it's just my lack of understanding, but like stronger shouldn't feel softer. And so when I polish the occlusion on a katana crown, it's not very much of that crown comes off, right?
Yeah.
It just feels very solid.
Sturdy,
And
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And to that point, right?
Yeah.
Like thousands and thousands of crowns in, no cracks, right? Like no.
And that's the amazing part. Like, I will dig deep if somebody says there was a crack. How? And all the time I've been with Kuraray, I kid you not, we have not had a failure. So if I hear somebody saying that there's a failure, I am on that phone. Like, I will fly out to you and try to figure out, how did it happen?
Right.
Like, what is, because that's what you and I did, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
talk to me about your workflow.
Yep.
So, and you
The
bring
birthday
up
cake,
the
right?
birthday
Yeah.
cake, right? So, and actually, you always amuse me with the stories in your office when you introduce something to Dr. Bishop and, your team. So actually it always brings me like so much joy, actually, because I'm just like, oh, I love when you were one of the first ones to kind of, I guess, accept it. And now you've introduced it to your team. And at first, talk to me about that. What was the initial reaction, and how did you get them to turn?
Yeah, so it's funny. So Dr. Bishop started his career at Medicaid practice, and so he didn't get the opportunity to do a lot of crown and bridge. And those that he did do was scanned, sent to the lab, and then he loved this assistant. I forget what the gentleman's name was, but he was in the Army, and he could adjust any crown and get it to fit, and it was just perfect, right? But it was a process, and if that assistant wasn't available, then he was in there adjusting that crown and getting that crown to fit. And that's what send to lab was. And that's what it was to me as well,
it's an insurance policy.
It is,
Pretty
right?
much.
Like you'll get something back and you will be able to get it to fit. It's just never a perfectly seamless product. And that's, that is not dependent on any lab. That's just dependent on the process, right? The teeth shift, the temporaries are as good as they can be, but it's just not the same as something that you're doing same day. And so when I was probably the first human being ever to have ordered a CEREC system before having ordered a dental chair, and all because it was after
If
COVID.
you build it, it will come.
Exactly.
That's
And
how it works.
I knew with 100% certainty that there was going to be no way I was not going to be a same day CEREC doctor. It had to be that way for me.
Yeah.
And so, we had to wait for our chairs. Everything was back ordered, and, they hadn't even finished painting the office, and there's a crate with a prime mill in it, like, where my desk is supposed to be. But that's how serious I was about introducing the product to my patients and to my team. And so when that started, we always have the discussion, right? They're like, well, what if I don't get used to it? And like, what if this? And you're always like, okay, well, that's fine. You can still scan and send to the lab, or even take a PVS if you really want to, to send this off. But, you're going to love this.
Right.
You're going to try this, right? And
at least try.
And
right?
I promise, and I can say with 100% certainty, I promise, once you get used to this, you're not going back. And it's funny, like, and you can watch the x-rays from the first couple ones, and they're good, right? But like, you get that perfect emergence from the root curving up, and that you cannot tell with an Explorer where that margin is with that zirconia. It's just polished, and it's just perfect.
Right.
And now, we take a lot of pride in delivering an x-ray that looks like that and showing the patient, this is your crown that didn't fit well before, and this is what it looks like now.
Right.
And we did this all for you the same day. now Dr. Bishop says that he needs to get a jersey, and that jersey is going to say King Katana. So he's like, there's just no option. Katana's the king. It's just, that's what we're going to do. It's just that's katana amazing. Or nothing. And it's so funny, like watching him go from
that transformation.
Yeah,
right? So
it's like okay, I'm interested. Like I'll give this a try. We'll kind of see how this goes. To how dare someone not do this, right? Like, and it's funny. And we always hesitate as dentists when we see work that isn't perfect.
Yeah.
Am I going to be able to deliver something better than what the previous guy did? Right? Because a lot of times, the patient's moving. It couldn't stop getting wet. They can't open their mouth. Like there's all these different factors that go into it. And it's so many times the dentistry that isn't done perfect. It's not a fault of the clinician. It's a fault of the process and the workflow somehow. Imagine trying to stick a PVS impression into someone that can't open their mouth, right? Or trying to put a band around a tooth all the way in the back that there's almost no tooth left, right? Like CEREC and Zirconia gives us clinical options for that. Right. And if I can't get it absolutely 100% perfectly dry, I know I can still lute it and get an acceptable option for that outcome. And so now we very often tell patients that we think that we can deliver better clinical results than what we're seeing on their x-rays, but we're not blaming the other clinician for their skills. We're blaming the other clinician for not having the technology and not having the materials to deliver that result. It's not us. It's
it's the options that they're given, so somebody's not backed in a corner with just one tool. Right? And so actually this is kind of wanted to round it off. So for somebody, let's say, that has not gotten into not just digital dentistry, but even katana, there's a lot of and zirconia. What would you say?
I would say if it weren't for katana, I wouldn't have gotten into CEREC, and if it weren't for CEREC, I would not practice dentistry the way that I do now. And I've always said that scope of practice was the most important thing for me. I want to be able to do the stuff it changes people's lives. And we do so with the technology to back us up. And so, for people that haven't experienced what that can be like, give it a try, right? Like call, if you're Patterson Shine, whatever your rep is, give them a call. Someone has a machine that they can bring you out and try that out and see what it's like, and realize that zirconia is not a lab product anymore. This is a same day, same in your office restoration. And furthermore, right, so many dentists order things from the lab and that restoration ends up glazed. And without going too far down the rabbit hole of what people do with a lot of glass ceramic restorations too, glazed restorations wear the opposing teeth.
Absolutely.
Period, right? Like 100%. Right. And so if you're looking to give the patient something that's going to last,
longevity, right?
That's going to last on that tooth and last on the rest of their arch, right? Like, wouldn't you rather have something that's wear coefficient is the same as enamel? Well, you can. It's polished zirconia. And then, you look into all these implant companies coming out with zirconia implants. I mean, it's actually biocompatible. So why would you not want to choose to have that be what's on your super deep subgingival crown? It makes logical sense when you think about it. And I guess to get back to your original question, do some research, look at some cases, look at some x-rays, ask some questions. There are plenty of people that are way smarter about this stuff than I am, and I am inspired by a lot of them. So I would say look into the community, see what other people are doing, both with the materials and with the technology, and imagine what you can do to elevate your clinical practice from a perfectionist standpoint. Like, what can you do from a radiographic standpoint to deliver better quality of care to your patients? And then when you think about the processes and the workflows, right, like, it is more profitable, more fun, and honestly just better for your patients to be able to do a lot of this stuff same day. So it is a very deep rabbit hole, as you and I both know, once you start opening this stuff up. But I would say for most clinicians, it can make logical sense, which is one of the things that I'm so excited with the advent of PrimeScan 2. It's like a lot of this technology is getting more affordable. So you have a lot less excuses for,
there's no more barriers to that.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
the options are even wider and it's greater. So I can't wait. I can't wait for you to find out more that, you know, we're working on things. You know, Kuraray is really working on making sure, you know, our motto is like everything is possible. So everything is possible. We asked you that when we first met in person. What's your wish list, right? So things are coming. You're going to be using some of these things that I will put them in your hands, and I can't wait to hear.
I can't wait. There's a lot of things I can think on my wish list that we've talked about, and I'm just so excited for us to get the opportunity to work with a lot of these products. So Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.